Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, my dear brothers, sisters, viewers, friends of Ikra TV. Welcome to another edition of Real Talk. I'm your host, Iqbal Bana. As I keep saying to you, I come and invade your privacy every Monday evening at this time of the day when a lot of people might be busy, either preparing food for their family, not just sisters, but I hope some of the men will be doing that as well, and looking after their children, and at the same time, in the background, watching this program as well. I try to bring to you sort of subjects of interest to the Muslim community or issues that affect the Muslim community on a day-to-day basis. Over the last few months, in particular, we've seen the extreme sort of rise of the right and anti-Muslim hatred on social media, portraying the Muslims as a negative influence in this country and for the foreseeable future. Now, we know as Muslims, we have contributed quite a large amount of our energy and efforts into building this country, particularly after the Second World War. And my subject matter today is the Muslim contribution to this country, not just during the war, but also afterwards when the migrants came here and propped up the businesses and the industry in this country, as well as went into entrepreneurship and set up businesses. A lot of them now are flourishing. And today my guest is a very eminent person, and I'm sure many of you who've been watching my program over the years will recognize him instantly, and that is Amjad Pervez, a man from Bradford who has risen to many, many heights. He is now international business and policy consultant across many, many countries, leading many organizations. He set up the growth program in Pakistan, particularly to empower young people. And he's been doing that, to be honest with you, in this country for the last 30 years that I've known him, with an organization we used to call the Asian Trades Link, which was a unique organization in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, which was trying to bring Asian businesses together and represent the businesses' sort of challenges and needs to institutional organizations. Amjad, welcome. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you for coming. And we're going to be talking about two areas. The first is about the Muslim contribution to the two wars. Now, I'm not sure whether many people will remember, I did a program about 3 years ago when a book was published about the Muslim contribution to the two world wars. And in that book, it showed how many Muslims had sacrificed their lives in the two world wars. In World War II, for example, in World War I, it is estimated 2.5 million Muslim soldiers and laborers from all over the world, particularly from the Asian subcontinent, the Middle East and Africa, served for the British Empire at that time. In World War II, it is recognized that there's 5.5 million Muslims participated on the Allied side of the war, and nearly 1.5 million Muslims were killed in action in the Second World War. So the contribution of the Muslim community has been phenomenal, which many people on the right are now ignoring or don't want to know about. And one of those people was Haji Mirza Khan Sahib, Amjad's father. And this year, we celebrated his 103rd birthday, wasn't it?
103rd birthday.
MashaAllah, Allah give him good health and good healthy life. And to honor his contribution to the British Army, two representatives of the royal family, deputy lieutenants from West Yorkshire, actually attended the family event to mark his 103rd anniversary. And this is a mark to show respect to his contribution, his service to the British Army in the Second World War. And then he came to this country, worked at the railways, and then went with his sons, went into business. We can now show you a short video of the celebratory event that was held by the family on his 103rd birthday, which was attended, as I say, with two deputy lieutenants who represented His Majesty the King at this event.
My granddad Mirza Khan, I call him Babaji, recently turned 103. He's seen 18 prime ministers, 5 monarchs and countless wars. It's the wars he remembers, and as he recalls that period of his life, he slips into Punjabi.
17 years.
He tells me he was just 17 when he signed up. The reason was simple. There was no food, no jobs, and the British Army paid a wage. His service took him to Burma, where he joined tens of thousands of other troops from the British Indian Army. It was grueling work fighting in the harsh jungle terrain. He says he wasn't scared and was given orders and told not to disobey them. During his time in Burma, he looked after the mules that carried supplies and ammunition for the Allies. He says we'd eat bread and we'd feed the horses the same meal. The Japanese bombed us. They wanted us to die. The bombs fell all around, but I survived. So when I was a teenager at school studying history, my granddad told me about his role in World War II, particularly in Burma. A lot of his friends and comrades were caught by the Japanese. Some survived, others didn't. And it's still so painful for my granddad to talk about that part of his life.
Yorkshire Cap there, true Bradfordian.
In the 1960s, he moved to England like many other soldiers who fought for Britain. My family often reflect on his life here.
Britain needed cheap labour, and that's where the soldiers came to service again. They came here in their droves. They worked in the textile mills, they worked in public services to rejuvenate the economy.
Thousands of soldiers died in the Burma campaign. Many of them came from Commonwealth countries. Their sacrifice and valour now immortalised in this memorial in the heart of Bradford. Many of them, like my granddad, made this city their home. Babaji. There's over 100 years between Babaji Mirza and his youngest great-grandchild, who may not yet understand the significance of his story, but will grow to respect the courage and resilience of his generation. Subir Pervez, BBC News, Bradford.
MashaAllah, subhanallah. I'm sure everybody who's been watching that clip, which was shown by BBC News on VJ, the day after VJ Day, which was victory in Japan. So everybody in the country saw that clip, and it was a proud moment, not just for Haji Sahab and his family, but the entire Muslim community in this country as well. And I pray that Allah gives Haji Sahab the best of life, the best of health, and inshallah keep him with us for as long as is Allah's intention. Can I just read? Also, let me let people know that in this document that I've come across about the Muslim contribution, there's a lot of elements there, but one particular element that that jumped to me was 9,000 to 12,000 Palestinians fought for Britain in World War II in Egypt and Mesopotamia, and also 1,500 soldiers from the Arab League who were mainly from Jordan. And one particular fact that really interested me was that Winston Churchill wrote a letter to the then President of the United States, Franklin Roosevelt, and he says, "We must not on any account break with the Muslims who represented 100 million people and the main army elements on which we must rely for the immediate fighting." That, coming from Winston Churchill, is really powerful words. Unfortunately, the vast majority of people don't seem to recognize the contribution that the Muslims have made. And maybe we have not really promoted that fact primarily over the last 20, 30, 50, 60 years that we've been here. But then the second part of the chapter starts, and that is people like Haji Sahab came over to this country, and they contributed not just to the textile mills and the engineering companies that were particularly in the Midlands and in Yorkshire, but they also helped the infrastructure, the NHS, for example, and the transport infrastructure, maintained those and kept them going. And then they went into entrepreneurship, and as I say, my guest Amjad Pervez is an example of how that entrepreneurship has really developed in this country. Amjad Sahab, you must be very proud of your dad, mashallah, obviously, and his contribution to not just the World War II, but also his subsequent journey into this country as well.
So Iqbal Sahab, thank you first of all so much for highlighting this unique and amazing contribution to the European survival, not just UK survival.
Yes.
So Western civilization as a whole owes the Muslims a debt, particularly the Indian subcontinent. And I agree with you that maybe we are not united enough in terms of actually presenting that view to the world. So I think my father's story is one story that reflects the contribution of almost every father and grandfather that we have known. So I think if you talked about the contribution that the soldiers made to winning against fascism and giving survival to the Western civilization, and particularly UK because it had an empire. But I think we need to go back slightly a little bit.
Go on.
So if we look at the East India Company when it took over India treacherously, at that stage India was the superpower. We controlled 27% of the world's GDP. So over the 200 years that the British Empire stayed there, it extracted, it robbed India of trillions and trillions of dollars. And by the time we got the independence in 1947, that GDP contribution to the world had dropped to 4%.
Wow, wow. From over 25 to 4%.
So the paved streets and the sewers that were built during the Victorian times didn't come from the taxpayers of UK. It actually was extracted from the poor people of India who were taxed, whether it was cash tax or from crops tax. So I think you rightly say that we contributed, but I think then if you look at the rights narrative, it is all the immigrants have come, they've taken their job, they've taken our houses, they're spongers, they don't actually contribute. So if you look at post Second World War, your industry here had been decimated, but the demand across the globe rose after the war in peacetime. Right? In order to meet that demand, because remember at that time, UK was the China of Europe. We were the producers that were actually supplying the empire.
We were the factories.
We are the factories. But with no cheap labor and this huge demand, we invited all these young people to come as cheap labor, right? And now we forget not only the contribution that our armies made and the young people who sacrificed that 1.5 million that you talked about. Conveniently, to be honest with you, when I was at university in the 70s and the 80s, right, when it used to be Victory Day or Victory in Europe Day, nobody even mentioned the contribution.
Oh, no,
I think it's people like you, right, who've got into the power houses and said, look, where is our contribution? This is our contribution. And alhamdulillah, now we're beginning to have that impact in terms of, representing the narrative. And then came our generation, and as Muslims, even though those are people who came in the first, flow of immigrants to help the UK regenerate its economy, they weren't really particularly educated in the formal sense. But because Islam teaches you that education is something that's
absolutely
worthwhile,
vital.
So my generation, which is the second generation, we were actually pushed to go to university, get the education, get the skills. And if you see across the UK now, you've got likes of Bestways, you've got likes of Adams and ICS and Lubna and all millions of other people who are contributing to the economy of UK. But conveniently, they forget.
Is it conveniently, or they use that to attack us even more? I mean, social media at the moment, with with the political sort of narrative that is now taking currency, the right wing, and in particular, they're showing the Muslims in a very negative light, right? And therefore, what do you think we need to do to try and bring these matters to people's attention, to say, look, this is what we've contributed?
Okay, I think what we really need to understand is understand the problem first, right? So in terms of crashing the economy, in terms of UK losing its competitiveness, that wasn't the fault of the immigrants, my father's generation or my generation or the younger generation. So people who are born here and are British, then I don't consider them to be immigrants. They may have a different color, they may have a different religion, but they're most definitely British as far as I'm concerned.
Oh, yeah, we're all British.
Yeah, so to these people, that is an alien concept. They can't accept that because they don't know conveniently their history and who saved them when the going was really tough. I think, but we've got to look at ourselves as well. So after, I mean, I came to UK 1969, I was 11 years old, I've been here for 50 years, and you talked about ATL and various other organizations, and me and you were talking about all the different initiatives that have been taken in terms of think tanks and people thinking, you know, in this hostile environment, what do we do? But I'll tell you where we failed. Where the Jewish Board of Deputies, where the Hindu community, the Chinese community have succeeded, where we've failed, we have huge number of organizations. But, you know, if I was sat in government, I would look at the Muslim community and say, who do I talk to for the Muslim community? So in terms of command and control, so in a family, in a bradri or in a kumbha, right, there's always people at the top who are the elders, who, yes, will consult the other members, but ultimately the buck will stop there. In any organized company or an organization, right, there'll be people at the top who create the vision, who pass down the vision, they then have the mission, they have the strategic objective, but then they devolve them and give ownership to the people, but they evaluate the performance. Okay, you know, having been involved in all these organizations, even the government here and across the globe, our fundamental weakness is that we lack the command and control. And when we lack the
because everybody wants to be a commander.
No, everybody wants to be a commander, irrespective whether they've got the skills, whether they've got the respect, right? Everybody wants that chair. Now, I can understand that from a human perspective of ego and wanting to be famous and leaving a legacy. But I think some of us who've been through the rigors of life and have got the scars of experience on our back, have got to take the responsibility. I think the business people, the academics, the thought leaders really need to unite. That, you see, my father, 103, you know, when I sit down and talk to him, and I often take his counsel, you know, when I'm making a major decision, right? And he once said to me when I was setting up ATL, he said, Amjad, if the engine of the train is perfectly tuned, the dabbe, the carriages will follow.
Will follow, yeah.
The problem that we haven't got the engine right. And the dabbes are pretending to be the engines.
Right. So good analogy, yeah.
Right?
So very good analogy, yeah.
So it's an amazing analogy. And then I think I think now with the imminent danger of what is happening, now there are two things you can do. You could either flee or you can fight.
Right.
And a lot of people that I know who've got the money, who've got the connections, right, are fleeing. So if you look at the statistics, last year 16,000 millionaires left UK. A lot of people that I hang around with, high net worths, have already been to their financial advisors and said, if this right wing comes into power, give us a contingency plan. Yeah. So I think the people who can have already made but I would say 95% of the people are going to be stuck here.
Oh yeah, there will be. I was just going to say,
what do we do?
Like
and for that, I think we honestly don't need more organizations. We, you know, in business, there are two ways of growing. You either grow organically or you take over. I think this camps of green hats, yellow hats, white hats, orange hats, right? We need to merge them. We need to have an umbrella organization. Yes, you can be diverse and independent in what you do, wherever your influence is. But on the bigger things, youth, deen, media, communications, political representation, right? Those are the big macro things which this organization needs to take charge of, right, and then devolve down.
I mean, that's always been one of the faults of the Muslim community, that we fight amongst ourselves. You know, everybody's got their own egos. Everybody wants to be in charge of, you know, whatever organizations are being set up. And I you know, perfectly agree with what you said at the beginning, and that is if you're sat in government, because it happened with me.
Yeah.
Because I was an advisor to the Home Secretary for nearly 20 years. And one day we had, you know, I was having this conversation with the Home Secretary at that time. And he said, Iqbal, well, our problem is which Muslim community organizations do we go to? If we go to this organization, they're criticizing that organization. If you go to that organization, they're criticizing the other organization, saying that they're not representatives of the Muslim community. And like I said, the difference between the Muslim community and the non-Muslim community is that there is a unity there. But sometimes I think, there's no evidence that I have, but some of that disunity is being created and engendered by some of those very institutions who complain about the fact that there's no unity. And we fall into that trap. But I mean, I suppose, before we went on air, you're talking about, this hierarchy. Our families are used to this hierarchy, aren't they?
Yeah.
You talked about, your father and the
Yeah.
So why is it that we fail to do that on a community level?
I think fundamentally, in any concept or any organization, there's a time for development. I think the first generation who came there was, we've come here for a limited time, we're going to make our money and we're going to go back home. That's what I call the myth of return. Bulk of them are either buried here or back home. Those that are remaining are most likely to be buried here. My generation, I don't think any of them are now taking the bodies back home, they're buried here. My own daughter, my mum is buried here, right? So I think slowly we're beginning to realize that this is our home, this is our future, this is our destiny. I think people like programs like this really help. I don't think we have enough of these debates. We've got too many kind of Asia-based media which actually comes here to make money and debate the politics of India, Pakistan, the war, the conflicts, the floods, whatever, which is, I don't have a point of disagreement with that. But I think fundamentally what we need is a narrative around what our issues and problems are. And you discussed that there is a think tank. I think most definitely we need a think tank, but that think tank needs to be resourced. So anything that we do now needs to be researched, our own research, not the research that other people have, because research can be biased and it can have an angle. Yeah. So I think once we have that research...
And I will be going to that research because I come across today with this organization called the Equi Think Tank, which has produced some really interesting economic factors, which has talked about, the Muslim community generates £70 billion a year annually to the economy of the UK. The British Muslim workforce contributes 42 billion. Muslim-owned businesses contribute between 16 to 20 billion. And charity, and we all know the Muslim charitable organizations are the most phenomenal, the biggest in the country. There's more. So I hope you've enjoyed the discussion debate so far. We talked about Amjad's father's contribution. There are millions of people like him. Now those who passed away, Allah give him the highest place in Jannah and give Amjad's father the good health that he deserves. I'll be coming back soon. Enjoy your tea, coffee, faluda, whatever it is you have during the break. We'll be joining you soon. 01274 214 299 is the phone number if you want to make a contribution of your own and share your thoughts. So we'll be talking about the economic side of the Muslim contribution when we come back. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.